Let's get to Tim Walz, who, just when you think no one's sitting at this table, neither she nor the big white blanket, can embarrass themselves any further, he does. She asks him, to her credit, about the carrying the weapons in war, which we know is a lie. He never served in war. He's been stealing valor for quite some time.
Tim Walz has long leaned on his image of being Minnesota nice, the approachable governor with a warm smile, a friendly handshake, and a down-to-earth persona. But when Megyn Kelly shifts her spotlight onto him, that polished facade quickly crumbles. She strips away the carefully maintained act, revealing a politician whose charm can't hide contradictions, missteps, and opportunism. Kelly doesn't merely challenge Walz's image, she dismantles it, leaving his reputation teetering like a house of cards in the wind.
Walz is also out on the new media tour and trying to help her when he's not defending his comments on the Electoral College. And he sits down with Michael Strahan, who's the best thing ABC has going. And Strahan actually asks him about his many, many lies. There's a much longer list than actually came up, but he did raise it to his credit. Here's how that went.
Tim Walz has spent years trying to brand himself as the everyman governor, a corn-fed Midwestern dad who just happens to run a state. He leans heavily on that Minnesota nice persona, the kind of guy you'd expect to show up at a church potluck with a casserole and a story from his high school football days. But when Megyn Kelly takes aim, that carefully built image topples faster than a lawn chair in a windstorm. Behind the warm smile and soft-spoken charm is a politician who's played every side of the fence, and Kelly makes sure those fences come crashing down.
Said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools.
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon for updates. Megyn Kelly doesn't just chuckle at the contradictions, she shines a spotlight on them, like a searchlight catching a raccoon in the backyard. Tim Walz has tried to brand himself as the steady hand of the Midwest, but the reality looks more like a politician juggling policies, promising one thing to one crowd while quietly whispering the opposite to another. And Kelly isn't fooled by the Minnesota nice act. To her, Walz isn't a leader at all. He's the human version of beige wallpaper, bland, forgettable, and painfully out of place once you notice how much it clashes with everything around it.
Some statements that just aren't true. And the comment about weapons of war that I carried in war, which you didn't. You said that you were in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre when you weren't. You kind of chalked it all up to bad grammar or getting the dates wrong.
Yeah.
But your opponents say you lied to make yourself look better. Do they have a point?
Well, look, 35 years ago, got the opportunity to be in Hong Kong, be in China, learned a lot about it, served 24 years in the National Guard, passionately, in an instance, talking about gun violence in schools.
The problem with Walz's brand of leadership is that it survives by pretending problems don't exist until they hit him square in the face. Rising crime. He shrugs and tosses out a feel-good line about community values. Struggling schools. He shows up for a photo op in a classroom, nodding like one smile could fix everything. And then, just as quickly, he disappears, leaving real solutions as rare as a Minnesota summer that lasts longer than 2 weeks. Kelly tears this apart, exposing how Walz has turned governing into little more than posing beside problems instead of solving them.
Fallout continues for Tim Walz on the disastrous performance he delivered, in particular when it comes to his self-described knuckle-headed behavior, which was just his latest in a series of lies. The reason he resorted to, "I'm a knucklehead," was he got confronted with his latest lie.
But it's not just the emptiness that Megyn Kelly goes after, it's the contradictions that practically expose themselves. Walz paints himself as the defender of small-town values, yet his policies often read like they were drafted straight from the playbook of big-city bureaucrats. One minute he's preaching about freedom and personal responsibility, the next is applauding government overreach when it benefits his political allies. Kelly highlights the pattern clearly. Walz isn't a steady leader, he's a political chameleon, shifting colors to match whichever audience happens to be watching.
People know me, they know who I am, they know where my heart is, and again, my record has been out there for over 40 years to speak for itself.
And the idea that you said that you were in war, did you misspeak as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog.
This took chutzpah. Let's go through it. You said you carried weapons in war, but you've never deployed in a war zone. A campaign official of yours said you misspoke. Did you? Well, I'm proud, incredibly proud of my record.
What really fuels the fire, though, is when Kelly zeroes in on Walz's handling of crisis. The pandemic turned his governorship into a real stress test, and the cracks showed fast. One day, he was playing the role of public safety guardian, handing out mandates like Halloween candy. The next, he was tripping over his own mixed messages, leaving Minnesotans more confused than reassured. Calm, Kelly argues, isn't the same as competent. Sure, he didn't panic on camera, but off camera, his leadership was as disorganized as a garage sale in the rain. Rules shifted daily, priorities flipped overnight, and his explanations sounded like excuses from a kid who forgot their homework. People weren't getting guidance, they were getting chaos, just delivered with a polite Midwestern accent.
On Earth, there's a long list of them. This one was that he was in China when the Tiananmen Square disaster unfolded, when hundreds of people were killed. You know whether you were in a place where hundreds of people are being massacred by their government when it happens. But he continues to try to say, like, oh, gee, I was just kind of confused. You know, that happened in May and I was there in August, but I guess I just imagined that I was there, whatever. So he got asked about that debate moment where he completely melted down.
When it comes to policing and public safety, Walz's contradictions stack up fast. He talks tough for the cameras, pledging support for law enforcement, but the moment progressive activists turn up the volume, he folds like a paper plate at a barbecue. Kelly points out that his so-called leadership during times of social unrest wasn't leadership at all. It was political duck and cover. He let chaos fester, hoping his passive stance would somehow be mistaken for understanding. But understanding doesn't stop riots, and empathy doesn't restore order. Kelly hammers him for trying to appease everyone, which only left everyone angry. The roast cuts even deeper when she compares Walz's governing style to Minnesota winters, long, dragging, and full of empty promises that spring is just around the corner, only for it to never arrive when people need it most. She also tears down the myth that Walz is relatable. Yes, he sprinkles in stories about growing up in rural Nebraska or teaching high school, but that doesn't change the fact that he's now a polished career politician. His everyman persona isn't authenticity, it's political cosplay.
Well, they're comparing this moment by Tim Walz to that because he looked so inept and like a faker, like he didn't belong there and he was trying to convince us of something that wasn't real as he decided to go pheasant hunting. And Charlie, you're a gun guy. You tell me whether this looked authentic to you. Here he is.
That's my theory.
And it never fits quite right.
Never fits quite right. Just not quite right. How do you give it back?
Governor, what kind of gun is it?
This is a Beretta A400.
Kelly ridicules the idea that Walz is still one of us. The reality is, he's been wrapped in the political bubble for so long that the only small town he remembers is the one scripted by his campaign consultants. And then there's his economic record, which Kelly dismantles piece by piece. Walz tries to sell his fiscal policies as steady stewardship, but under his watch, Minnesota has looked more like a test run in how quickly you can make taxpayers roll their eyes. High taxes? Check. Bloated budgets? Double check. And somehow, despite all that spending, basic services still fall short. It's like buying every kitchen gadget in the store and still not being able to cook a decent meal. But Walz's sights are set higher. He's eyeing bigger stages, and Kelly doesn't just laugh at that idea, she crushes it. If he can't manage one state without collapsing into contradictions and mixed messages, how could he possibly handle the national stage? It's like a guy who can't run a lemonade stand suddenly thinking he's ready to run Starbucks. Ambition without competence isn't leadership, it's delusion. And Kelly makes it clear, Walz is a man who mistakes photo ops for governance and applause for actual results.
Equally proud of my service in the classroom. Did I mention I was a teacher and a coach, an assistant coach? Okay, whatever. But he's more stolen valor. In the classroom, I'm in the classroom. My record speaks for itself. It doesn't actually. You've put a lot of lies into that record that you've been called out on by service personnel. You must clarify, as your campaign had tried to do, And now you appear to be distancing yourself from that clarification. And then here's two pieces of this that are really, I speak like they do. People are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves. And I speak especially passionately about, and then he goes on to blame it on the school shootings. I guess he was upset about school shootings, so he lied. But stop saying you speak.
Kelly goes even further, dismantling the illusion of Walz as some kind of unifier. His defenders like to say he brings people together, but Kelly flips that claim on its head. The only unity he creates is when people across the political spectrum roll their eyes at his speeches. Democrats see him as too cautious, Republicans see him as too reckless, and independents see him as a man who couldn't make a decisive move if his life depended on it. The unifier label isn't an achievement, it's a punchline. Walz has united people in disappointment. And in today's political climate, mediocrity isn't harmless, it's dangerous. Because when leaders skate by on charm and dodge tough choices, it's the public who pays the price. Kelly tears the Minnesota nice image to shreds, showing that Walz isn't the calm, steady hand his supporters claim. He's just another politician coasting on a hollow reputation.
Environment.
And Vice President Harris said that she told you to be a little bit more careful on how you say things.
Well, I did it, even the other day of just speaking passionately about these gun violence situations and meeting with these survivors. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I do think in these positions, whether it be governor or being vice president of the United States, you do need to be careful. You do need to be a little more thoughtful on it.
Okay, guys, I will submit to you that the American people are not dumb. And I would submit to you that the American people will look over "I'm friends with school shooters," which he said in that vice presidential debate, as him misspeaking. Everyone will give him that grace. But it's not going to work on this litany of other lies, because you don't misspeak over and over.
He's a politician whose greatest talent is surviving criticism by smiling through it while failing upward. And Kelly makes sure the audience sees that with brutal clarity. Behind every folksy grin and soft-spoken answer lies a career defined not by vision, but by avoidance. Walz may have believed his smile was armor, but Megyn Kelly turned it into a bullseye, and she didn't miss. His entire strategy has been to rely on the public forgetting, moving on, or simply not caring enough to look deeper. He banked on politics' short attention span, convinced that if he just kept smiling and repeating his homespun slogans, people would eventually give him the benefit of the doubt. But for all his talk about accountability and transparency, Walz's administration has built a reputation for dodging scrutiny. When the tough questions come, answers are buried in bureaucracy, drowned in talking points, or kicked down the road until people stop asking. Kelly calls it exactly what it is, not leadership, but a shell game meant to dress incompetence up as strategy. It's the political version of slapping a fresh coat of white paint over water damage, hoping no one notices the cracks spreading underneath.
On Wednesday in Pennsylvania, and here's how he handled it.
I have my dates wrong. I was in Hong Kong and China in 1989. That move from Hong Kong into China, it was profound for me. That was the summer of democracy. I said it's where I understood how sacred democracy was. It's what encouraged me about 15 back and forth with my students, taking them to China. I speak like everybody else speaks. I need to be clear, I will tell you that, but here's my whole point on that thing with China. I do understand China a hell of a lot better than Donald Trump. Kamala Harris understands.
And those cracks only keep spreading. On education, Walz has cast himself as the champion of Minnesota's future, but test scores tell a very different story. Reading and math proficiency have dropped sharply, classrooms are struggling, and his solutions amount to pouring more money into the system without demanding accountability or real results. Kelly zeroes in on the hypocrisy. He promises opportunity for every child, yet delivers a status quo that leaves parents frustrated, teachers drained, and students falling behind national standards. Walz can wave the banner of equity all he wants, but equity without outcomes is nothing more than expensive window dressing. Then there's the economy, supposedly his strong suit. Walz talks like he's building opportunity, but in reality, many Minnesotans feel like they're just treading water while being taxed into exhaustion. Kelly cuts straight through the spin, exposing the truth. Walz confuses optics for outcomes and appearances for actual progress.
On an instance there, proud of the service that I've done, proud to be a teacher in that classroom, proud to have been very public all these years and owning it when I, said, look, I was there in August of '89. And I think the policies, whether it be dealing with China and understanding China's human rights record, what you can be certain there is that Kamala Harris and I aren't going to, pick dictators on speed dial.
Well, but it's one of the things of trust. So there are going to be some people who say, we can't trust him even tell the truth about himself.
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
Well, I said they know who I am. I know who I am. I know the work that I've done. I know that things get spun in a political environment.
The most devastating blows come when Kelly exposes Walz's habit of following instead of leading. He's mastered the art of waiting to see which way the political wind is blowing, then jumping in front of it and calling it courage. During the George Floyd protests, Minnesota looked to its governor for control, but Walz floundered. Torn between activists demanding sweeping change and citizens pleading for safety, he avoided tough decisions and ended up disappointing both sides. Critics slammed him for being too soft in some moments and too harsh in others. Kelly calls it exactly what it was: indecision dressed up as balance. The pattern carried into the pandemic. Schools stayed closed longer than necessary, businesses crumbled under drawn-out restrictions, and mental health crises soared. Walz's version of leadership was clinging to caution until political pressure forced him to ease up. Kelly frames it as the story of a governor not guided by vision, but by fear, and it was families who were left to pick up the pieces.